Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Deadpan Diaries. I'm in control. That's Bronze Girl, that Bronze Girl.
The one and only.
And we're going to start how we always start every show with just going around and asking everybody, which is just two people right now, everybody how they're doing. Bronze, what's new? What are you up to? You were just in California. Why? Why are you in California?
I had a project with Geek and Sundry.
Oh my
And
god.
yeah, so I went down there, shot it, and then
And it's a
came back.
secret.
Yeah, it's a secret. I can't talk about it. But funny thing, my director is a big StarCraft fan. So
Oh.
he totally knew who you were, which was kind of cool.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, I'm friends with him. And he kind of gave me that look like, okay, sure.
Cameron.
And I was like, no, we have like a podcast. Yeah, and all of this was prompted because I have an emotional support plushie. Because sometimes when I sleep in strange places, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and be like, "Oh my god, where am I?"
Really?
So I have like a panic attack in the middle of the night, like at a hotel or something. It's really weird. So, I saw somebody about it and they were like, "Oh, you should take something like really familiar with you. And that way when you wake up and you're like, where the fuck am I? You see this familiar like anchor and you're like, okay,
And it
clearly I'm
works?
somewhere I'm supposed to be." Yeah, it works. Mine is a Baneling and his name is Bumbles and I take him everywhere. And I had just gotten back from the airport and I had him with me and one of my buddies was like, "That's a really cute lice you have, like a little lice plushie." And I was like, "Why would I have a lice plushie? This makes like who's just like, oh, I'm gonna have a little
You know what I like about this
lice."
though is like a baneling's a better explanation. It's like it's not a lice, you silly goose. It's a baneling. It's like
Yeah, and he was like, "Oh, like from the StarCraft." And I was like, "Yeah, that." And it started this whole conversation about StarCraft, and it was, like, pretty amusing. I
an
just thought you should
icebreaker.
know that.
Yeah, it's an
We
icebreaker
talked
too.
about you.
Well, as long as it's good stuff, that's all. It's nice.
Mhm.
That's the funny thing about
Yeah.
StarCraft. It's been around so damn long that there's like almost everyone has had some brush with it. They're like, "Oh, that game. Yeah, my father used to play it," and it's always. Then it's funny though because I'm like, "How old are you?" They're like, "I'm 23 now, and I started when I was 11." You're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
20
Yeah, that's
years."
crazy. I feel like for me, it's always, like, anytime I talk about StarCraft, people always bring up their other, because everybody had an RTS at some point. That was, like, BRs before because, everything comes in waves. As much as people love to hate on BRs and say, "There's too many BRs."
Oh yeah.
We never said there was too many MMOs. We never said there was too many RTSs. It's just another wave and, we'll enjoy it while it's here. But yeah, for me, it was definitely like Age of Empires, like big time. I was super big Age of Empires fan. And everything I knew about history, I learned more from Age of Empires 3 than I ever learned in school. I swear to God. Like, I remember our teacher like briefly mentioned the Moors, and I was like, ah, yes, the Moors. And I remember she talked something about the Crusades, and I was like, it's interesting to note that Saladin, although he was considered a Middle Eastern and a savage, actually showed more compassion to his European captors than they showed to their prisoners. He offered them water and shelter and sent them on their way. And like my teachers would always just be like, how the fuck does this 7-year-old know about Saladin and
And
shit
why are
like
they
that?
talking
Be
like
like,
that?
Age of Empires 3. I'm like, Professor Bronze.
That's good though. I mean, we could have a whole episode on this, but I think that's funny
Yeah.
because there's like kids, all kids in this day and age, all have a fucking iPad. They probably have an iPhone at like age 9, and it
Mm-hmm.
probably is too much. It's too early, but they also have the entire internet at their disposal at incredibly young ages.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some
We had
weird.
Encarta. I had a whole conversation in my chat about Encarta where like kids our age used to sit on Encarta all day for fun. Like that was fun.
Oh my god.
It was a fun thing to do.
Was
The
it Bronze? It
Baneling
was a.
plushie. You didn't have
Was
fun
it?
with Encarta?
Did I sit on a card all day?
I did. They had
Well,
this game called Mind Maze, and I was a very big fan of it.
okay.
Yeah, I was a nerd.
Hang on. Cobra's saying he played that too. All right. So there are other people with Bronze. It wasn't just you.
Yeah,
I'm not
see? Thanks,
sure that it was
Cobra. Thanks
cool,
for
but
having my back.
yeah. Okay. So people did it. I just
Everyone
don't know if it
played
was
it.
cool. People, I don't know. They played sports. Anyways, did you
Oh,
not play sports as a kid?
um, I did actually. I did. So I played basketball when I was in America, and then when I was like 10, I moved to India. And there I was like cursed because for an Indian, I'm actually pretty tall.
Mm-hmm.
And so my teachers forced me to do everything. They'd be like, look at your physique. And I'd be like, I am not fit, man. Like, I'm just not. And they'd be like, look at you. And I'd be like, I'm tall. Yeah. But like, you are going to do long jump. I have a feeling you're going to have talent for this. And then they'd see me and they'd be so disappointed. They'd be like, how? Why has God given you these legs, but he have not given you anything else? And I'd be like,
damn.
and I was like the tallest kid in my class. I was taller than all the girls and most of the boys. There was only 5 boys who were taller than me. And I'm only like a little bit over 5'7". I'm not that tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you born in India, went to America, then back to India?
The opposite. I was born in America, went to India, and then back to America.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Born in America till 10, then went back to India?
Mm-hmm. And then came back here for college.
Was that culture shock as shit? Because like 10 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're pretty American at 10.
Oh, yeah.
Go back to
Yeah.
India.
That's why I probably don't have like an accent. I have an accent with some words, but
Oh, like what? I don't think I've ever heard it.
it's like words I learned when I got older. So like schedule. I usually say like, oh, let me check my schedule.
A little British.
Or like aluminium.
Oh God.
Things like that. I think
we had
you
that
commented.
whole talk. Yeah, we had a whole talk about it. I have actually lived 33 of my fucking years of life without knowing that it was said any other way. Not even said another way, like completely different.
Yeah, it's spelled differently too.
Aluminium or whatever. What do you say?
Aluminium.
Yeah, and apparently that's the original way to say it. And Americans are just like, aluminum.
It's hard for me to say aluminum. Like it's actually hard. Aluminum.
Aluminum. Yeah, but it's one of those things where like now that we're talking about it, now I can't say it either. I'm like, how is it that I said it?
What's funny is when I was growing up, I could say it fine, but then, you know, all those chemistry classes like flushed out the original pronunciation, and now I default to aluminium. And sometimes I'll be like, oh, aluminum can, but it's hard for me to say it. It doesn't sound normal.
Where I'm unlearning as we talk about this, so. Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I was gonna try to be a good host. Thank you everyone for tuning in for episode 2. I was gone last week, so we're getting this show up and off the ground. Eventually, the idea, and actually maybe as soon as next week, we got to hear back from Bronze's friend, but she has a trainer friend, and we both, all 3 of us, if the guest is on there, we all go to the gym quite often, and I get asked about. I'm sure Bronze gets asked about it a lot, but I get asked about it all the damn time. The gym, a lot of it. So I think we're going to try to have a gym episode, which is going to be very, I mean, this is what I love about the idea of us having the show is like, we're all over the place, man. For 2 weeks ago was toxic positivity, but we talked about all kinds of stuff. This week, we're going to talk about motivation, just the concept of it, and a couple ideas that kind of follow that therein, which is really fun. That's amazing.
Yeah. If I can get him on, my friend is actually like, that's what he specializes in.
Yeah.
He owns a few gyms and he specializes in getting people into working out. And as a trainer, he focuses on people who are just starting out. So I think he might be a really good resource for people who have questions about how to get comfortable, like going and how to get started, because that's his specialty.
That's really good. And yes, I think that'll be like a more question heavy episode, which I'm excited about as well.
I mean, he's also a D&D nerd, so we can talk just about just about anything.
Oh yeah, so we'll do that. But like I said, we're gonna have more guests on is the idea. And anyways, like last week, I was gone in Poland, and maybe we'll get to a place where one of us can solo host or whatever, or have guests. But I didn't want to start off the show and then be like, Bronze, next week, by the way, it's all you. See ya, peace. I didn't want to do that. So anyways, we missed a week. We'll get back on track. We should be good to go moving forward. So yeah, let's just introduce the topic.
You're fantastic.
What?
I saw you on live stream fails.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Drawing dicks on the board.
See, now I contest. It's not a dick since I did not finish the drawing. Could have been anything. That was funny though. I'll save this for the show because there's a lot of people who are so funny. They're like, Jeff, are you fired? Are you gonna ever do another event again? I'm like, no, I'm not fired. But the question of like, is that okay to do? I have a little bit more elasticity in terms of what I can say and do on stream than I think most people, but also I'm backed by the fact that I think if everyone drew a bunch of dicks, then Blizzard would come down on us like a ton of, kind of rhymes just too bad. They'd come down on us like a ton of bricks and be like, stop drawing dicks, you guys. or there's gonna be trouble. But Blizzard definitely reached out to our producer and was like, "Hey, tell Jeff not to do that anymore." Which I love that. I think that's the funniest concept because growing up, my dad, every time we got out of his car, he always had a nice car. That was like his thing. He's a nice car guy. We get in the garage, and before we could open our doors, he'd look at each of us, me and my siblings, and be like, "Hey, don't bang your door," which I thought was amazing because I thought, in what world do we just like bang our door? And he's like, "Damn, I wish I would have told them not to bang their doors." Like we don't do that. But same thing. Blizzard's like, "Hey, tell Jeff not to draw any more dicks," because I didn't have dicks planned out for the entire event or whatever. But anyways, so people were wondering if I got in trouble. That's it. They just kind of reach out and say, "Please don't," and then I stop. But I'm always poking and prodding at the boundaries. So, Bronze, our topic is motivation. What was I actually, for whatever reason, it's the black hole in my mind. It's motivation and what? You said something else.
Discipline.
Discipline. These two concepts. So, Bronze is 2 for 2 on topics. By the way, I swear to God, I'll think of one too at some point. But this is you. Why don't you introduce it? What were you thinking about when you said motivation and discipline as a concept?
It's something that people ask me about a lot, and I've seen some people in your chat ask you about it too.
Oh yeah.
And it was one of those things that I feel like, to me, it's something that I cultivated over time. And I was kind of curious if it's something that comes to you naturally. Did you used to be a lazy motherfucker and now you're not? So, because I think both of us have talked about how we view a lot of people on Twitch as being not motivated or disciplined. They're a lot of them. I mean, especially outside of esports, a lot of them are kind of like, this is their first job and they never learn those
Oh
things.
yeah.
And because of that, I think a lot of people view the two of us differently because we don't really fall into that category. And so I thought we could sit down and have a discussion about, I don't know, like motivation versus discipline.
Oh, I
Because in
like
my
this though.
opinion, they're two very different things. And also like how we stay motivated or disciplined or challenges to that maybe
And
people
what
relate to.
motivates you? I think
Yeah.
this talk can get mega deep because I think
Yeah.
what I liked about it, what my mind naturally gravitated to, I don't think we should necessarily start here, but I think one of the interesting concepts of this is I think a lot of times people are motivated by things that they're not even consciously aware of or they don't at least think about very often. And it's only kind of in my later years I even started to think about it. Like I think I've done a lot of things in my life, certainly motivated for one reason or another, but never really consciously aware of what that motivation is, which I think is not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm of the opinion that the more introspective you are and the more you think about things, the better equipped you are to hone and harness that. Whereas if you just kind of, and I'm going to tell you, I went through like at least 18 years of my life not really thinking about these things. I just did shit, right? Like a terrible example, but kind of loosely able to describe this would be I use language that I now really don't like. Like I would, if I saw a pink car, I'd be like, that's a gay car. What a gay car.
Oh, I used to too.
Yeah.
I used to drop F-bombs like crazy, said retarded all the time.
Retarded is a
I
big
was
gamer one too.
wildly like problematic,
Yeah.
especially because I grew up in a country where like the F-bomb wasn't considered hate speech. So then I came here and I would say it all the time. And people would say, like, you really shouldn't say that. Like, that's something that homophobes say.
Yep.
We know you're not homophobic, but when you say that, you're kind of lumping yourself in with them.
Right.
And I was like, well, I don't think it's a hate slur, so I'm just going to keep saying it. And now I'm like, man, one day somebody's going to pull up my old stuff and be like,
Yeah.
with Twitter's cancel culture, I'm out of here. I just embrace it though, in the sense, and by that I mean in the sense that like I've done and said probably really fucked up things. So I never claim to be a perfect example for anything. And I wish more people, instead of denying it, would just embrace it and be like, yeah, I used to be kind of a little bit of an ignorant, piece of shit.
Even what you just said is another entire
I'm really sorry.
people need to remind us these are like entire episodes. The
Yeah.
concept of accepting that you fucked up or done wrong. I've had some really ridiculous examples in my life of people that like never they were like the golden childs of their family. So when it came to be that they had messed up, it unraveled them. They weren't able to they like doubled down on the sin basically because they're just like, well, I'm not that person, so this must not be real. Anyways, we're getting off topic a little bit. I tried to use an example, but it's also another topic.
See, look, you came up with the topic.
Yeah, once we start talking, I can. And I'm like, let's remember that next week. And the next week, I'm like, fuck, what do we talk about? Anyways, so motivation. Where do you want to start with? What's your interesting point?
Yeah. Well, I think like first off, the difference between motivation and discipline. To me, motivation is when you remind yourself of a goal or a reward that you want, and that is what compels you into action. Versus discipline is when you do the action for the sake of doing the action.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that too many people are driven by motivation, and that sometimes leads to your downfall versus discipline. That being said, I also think motivation is demonized a lot. A lot of people are like, "Oh, motivation is like, it's lame. It doesn't stick around. The second you don't see results, you move on." I think motivation is great for short-term goals, for small things like, "Oh, you know what? If I just came home from the grocery store. If I chop up my vegetables and put them in Ziploc bags now, then for the rest of the week, I will have like everything will be chopped and ready to go. It's going to make it so easy to like whip myself something up for lunch. Like that's motivation in a very small way.
I like this topic though,
Whereas,
because that kind of blurs the
yeah,
line, right? Like that's discipline as well.
yeah, a little bit, yeah. But you're getting something out of it, and you have to remind yourself what you're getting out of it in some ways, as opposed to like we were just talking about the gym. Like motivation at the gym for a lot of people might be losing weight. Now, I'll tell you right now, for a lot of people, that doesn't happen
Hmm.
very quickly. And when it starts to happen, there is such a thing called plateaus, and you will go weeks, maybe even months without losing weight per se. You might get smaller because you're gaining muscle mass, but depending on yourself and your goals, you might not see the results you want at all, or you might stop seeing them for long periods of time. And if that's the only thing that's motivating you, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure because the second that you stop seeing those results, you're going to get defeated and you're going to stop going. And it's the same thing with streaming, it's the same thing with anything like that. If your motivation for something is, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to get followers and I'm going to make money, the first time you go live and you have 10 viewers and you have a shit attitude because you were hoping for 40, it's just going to go downhill and you're setting yourself up for failure. So discipline is like more of a useful tool, in my opinion, for long-term goals because you set yourself up in a situation where you're like, well, I'm going to go to the gym or I'm going to do this thing because I've decided that this is something that enriches my life or it's an activity I enjoy. And regardless of the outcome, I'm going to continue to do that. And that helps you sort of stick with it.
Yeah, yeah. I think of discipline as a tool to get towards, like you're saying, it's more of a long term goal, and I think that that is a good way to describe it. But what I think is interesting about discipline is how absolutely it has a positive connotation if you think about it, which is also kind of interesting too. Like if you have discipline, that means you have made a conscious effort and decision to put forth a set of actions that will have an end result. Almost nobody talks about discipline in reference to like they've trained themselves to do something bad, right? It
Hmm.
actually can mean that, and that's what I think
It
is.
can, yeah.
That's why I like this topic a lot because I think it's got so many different damn layers to it. Be it motivation or discipline, it needs to have an introverted look, but also, in my opinion, and I think almost everything, and this is again not how it's talked about. Discipline needs to have a multiple set of eyes on it, right? Like using this is kind of a shallow example, but I think it's interesting. Even the gym, going to the gym, yes, that's great. That's more healthy than not. Meal planning, meal prepping, yep, that's all good. But it's kind of funny because how many times do you hear about the person that like overtrains a certain muscle group and then the
Yeah.
results dip and then all the discipline in the world results in either poor feedback or actually hurting yourself, which then hurts the motivation, which then trickles down and like can deteriorate the discipline. Or through discipline, you train yourself to do something that's actually just straight up not good for you. Like, I need to have the discipline to not eat this certain thing. I will have no carbs for the month of March. And it
Yeah.
turns out your body actually, and I'm not saying you as in everybody, and this is absolutely true, but for that person, maybe they did need carbs or they're overcompensating in something else. So I think an interesting way to look at this through motivation and discipline is how important it is to have outward perspective and eyes and people help you forge discipline and have motivation. Because I think that's something people don't talk about very often.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree. And people are saying, "Oh, well, if you go to the gym, you're gonna see results." That's actually a very big falsehood. Um, like, there's times everybody hits plateaus, especially like women. Neuro Warriors in chat. He's also very experienced. He's
Mhm.
that doctor friend I always tell you about.
Oh,
That,
cool.
'cause, yeah. But there is such a thing as like your body will go through a phase where you start packing on pounds in areas you never did before, and you're still working out the same, eating clean, and all that stuff, and it doesn't budge. And one of my friends uses this line, and I've adopted it. And it's like to enjoy the work,
Hmm.
and it's literally just you go there because and you learn to enjoy the act of doing the work. Um, I didn't when I first started, which was really rough. When I first started lifting, I definitely did not enjoy going there and doing it, and now I do, but I had to do it enough to where it was like, "This is no longer uncomfortable, like, I
Mm.
feel comfortable here." And now that I enjoy the work, I don't worry about the scale as much. I don't worry about, "Oh, well, I'm starting to bulk a little bit," because that's also a huge myth is that women don't bulk. That's
Yeah. Or that if they lift too much, they will look like a man and overbulk or whatever, which is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
gets weaponized a lot.
It
We're making
does,
this a
it
gym episode. We
does.
got to be careful, but yes.
Mhm. It's one of those things where it's like if I went into it like, everybody's body is so different, which is
Hmm.
why we should probably talk about this next week, but
We're doing it.
everyone's goals are so massively different,
Yeah.
and there's no such thing as localized weight loss. And so if people like my dad who eat nothing but fish and jog 8 miles a day, and the last thing to go was his like gut, like he had little bird legs, but the last thing to go was his beer gut. Now he looks fit as hell, but that was after like over a year of doing this. And
Okay.
it's just one of those things that I think everybody's goals are very different, and having the discipline to continue doing the work and enjoying doing it is more important than being motivated by your ultimate goal to fit into that pair of pants or to lift X amount of weight. Because even that, like, I've been stalled on my bench press for like 2 weeks or
Yeah.
3 weeks. Because the more and more you lift, like, at first, when you first start, your growth is gonna go, like, insane, and then, like, that first year of lifting is awesome, every week is a new PR, and then as you work out longer and longer, the time between those is, like, also longer and longer, and you just learn to embrace that and enjoy your strong days and enjoy your weekdays because you're just there to enjoy that hour for yourself, and you're not there to, "I'm gonna bench press my body weight." No, it's like,
I feel
you're
like you're
there to
describing
enjoy
is
that
something
time.
that without putting the words to it necessarily specifically, which is that motivation changes as well. So some people set into something and they're like, I'm motivated to do this. And then I think what's so interesting is that you either hit that goal and then it becomes like for some people they describe it as like it's really hard to become motivated after that.
Mhm.
Or you consciously decide that your motivation slash your goals that you're trying to accomplish are movable and they're not actually a fixed thing, right? Like
Yeah.
some people every New Year's, every January, people are like, I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week, and then what ends up happening is like, God, we're still using the gym example, but anyways, the what ends up happening is they're like, well, I can't, I can only go 4 times a week, so then it becomes four, and then they're like, well, it's three because I'm just really tired because I got 2 kids as well, and then it kind of starts scaling backwards, but the opposite's true too, where they're like, I did go 5 times a week, and then my results started to plateau, so now it needs to be 6 times a week as opposed to
Yeah.
changing the goals inside of the goals, right? Like it's not just going to the gym. Once you establish that, that was your motivation, was just to get in the gym. But then after that, it becomes more of a like, I want to run a triathlon by the next year or something, and I need to change it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something you train for. That's how I got started. I was like, I signed up for a marathon for charity, and it was to climb the Space Needle, and, I think it was what, 88 flights of stairs, and I was
Holy
like,
God,
"Well, I guess I'm going to start"
I can't imagine.
training, and I did, and, I did it. I didn't hit the time I wanted, but that was okay. Um, and yeah, it was like a good experience, but that for me was my start. I had to give myself like a very strong goal for me personally to get there.
Hmm.
Whereas when I first started, like before that, I would be at the like you said, I'd do something for a few days and do something for a few weeks and then let it go. And I think the reason like And Grayson, it's totally cool that you disagree with me. I love that. To give a little bit more background on why I brought up streaming and the gym and the same thing is actually something that Jeff said about how your motivation changes. I feel like a lot of people who don't stick with it, or they get pretty bitter and angry early on, the reason that I avoided that was because I didn't come into it with this idea like that with motivation. I didn't come into it like, I'm gonna do this full time. I'm no, I had a full time job. I
Mhm.
didn't even have a PayPal set up. I didn't have overlays or alerts. And people would say like, "What if I want to support you?" And I'd be like, "I don't know, just watch." And I just enjoyed streaming. And the only reason I ever went full time with it was because I got offered opportunities outside. There was a studio in Seattle at the time, and they were kind of giving me a really awesome way to, like, supplement my income from streaming, and I got to go full time, and for me, that's why it worked out. Now, I understand that that doesn't apply to everybody, but I think that that's actually something that people don't realize about streaming is there's a lot of variables in this,
Oh yeah.
and nothing is guaranteed. So if you're doing it with some motivation in mind that I'm going to be partnered, I'm going to live off of this, I'm going to hit 300 viewers concurrent, you will burn out
Yeah.
because the idea of that happening, you really have to think deep down inside and think about why you're doing it. Like, why is it that I do this? What is it that I'm trying to do? What kind of footprint am I trying to leave on the world? And for me, that's why I kind of stuck with it because I had an idea of the kind of content I wanted to make. And then I was disciplined enough to hold myself accountable. Because I think a lot of people don't realize that enjoying something isn't enough to make sure you keep doing it. We'll make all kinds of excuses for ourselves, like that book that you've been working on that's been sitting there for, you know, 8 months, or this, like, I've always wanted to learn French. A lot of people have these different things that they enjoy. And when you ask them how they spend their free time, a lot of times they'll say, "I just don't have time for this hobby," or "I just don't have time for that hobby." And for me, streaming was that hobby. And the reason it went somewhere was because I had the discipline to stick with it. But part of that was I had the discipline to make sure that I structured the rest of my schedule around this thing, um, which gets into a totally different thing. A lot of
Oh yeah.
times our pipe dreams never come true. And it's because we're too busy watching Umbrella Academy and the newest season of Netflix or of Daredevil on Netflix. And we don't make time for the things that we really enjoy and we love, and those kind of just end up by the wayside and therefore never go anywhere, and that's its own form of discipline. I think people always think discipline is something that's unpleasant. It isn't
Mm.
really. Sometimes it's something that is an activity you enjoy, but you always find yourself spending 3 hours on Reddit or 2 hours on Twitter a day instead of sitting down and really mindfully spending your time off, if that makes sense. Like, if you only have 2 hours of free time in a day, you should be really mindful about how you spend that time, and in my opinion.
Yeah, I think again part of the reason why I was engaged in this topic though is because I feel like there's such a counterpoint to almost everything we say, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
I feel like with discipline, there is an absolute inherent privilege associated with that. At least when you talk about it fairly openly, because sometimes, and I think this is why it kind of goes back to the root for me, which is so important to be conscientious of what your motivation or your discipline is. Like some people will be like, I want to be a streamer, so I was disciplined and I just made it happen, and I didn't burn out because I just set smaller goals and I made it happen. It's almost spoken as if it's guaranteed to happen or it can if you
It's
just do this
not.
string of things. I think it's absolutely imperative that you accept and at least acknowledge the possibility that you can have all the discipline in the world, um, but because there's not like a list that's put in front of you like, hey, here's the things you actually can accomplish. There's no list, right? We're just kind of, I think most people are raised to believe if you put your mind to it or if you work hard enough you can get it, and I think that's a good way to view the world. It's like a good starting point, but I think it's actually disastrously not true, and I think it's tough, right? Because I think for some people they can put in all the work, they can have all the discipline, they can not go on Reddit, they can not watch any shows, they can spend every hour of every day doing what they can to be a good streamer, and it just won't happen. It's just not
Yeah.
clicking.
Yeah.
Or let's do the, like, let's zoom back and be like omniscient about it. Maybe it would work, but it would take 7 years of no income, and it would take just this, like, the barriers that exist there make it so that it's not possible despite your discipline. What I think's interesting about that, though, is that that's true about everything, right? Like someone could be like, I don't know if I want to have kids because what if they turn out to be a terrible person or they have a terminal disease right at birth? You can't do that with everything, right? You can't be like, I'm never gonna have kids because there's bad possibilities. You have to roll the dice, and that's life too. And I think in a strange way, that's a weird discipline that I personally espouse and have pretty good, which is like all the time people are like, well, what if that doesn't work out? You know, like, are you sure? And I'm like, well, I'm not selling the farm on it, but it's a reasonable risk. And if I work hard at it and I have my resources aligned and I'm gonna put the work in, then I can do it. But to your point, what's the tough part too is, and this is where it kind of dials back to you need other people's perspective and help, or at least some outside resources. Is how do we know, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're trying to start as a streamer and you're like, God damn, I've given it 6 months and I've got 3 viewers and it's just not going anywhere. If you just go off of that, maybe it's the 7th or 8th month that those 3 viewers become 13 and 30, and then from there it becomes something. Or maybe it's year 1.3. You know, like you don't
Mm-hmm.
know. You need allies and people that can help and help you hone that discipline or motivation and make it realistic for you. Which is the part about this that I think is really interesting. Is when we talk about discipline, it's like, you know, almost like samurai esque. Like if you have discipline, you're this honorable, amazing thing. But I've seen people with discipline that are fucking people over. Like they're like, I'm not gonna name names, but I've have someone in my extended family that are like, they don't say yet. Like if you ask them, what are you doing at 5 o'clock on Thursday, they'll never tell you I'm free. They'll never say it because to them, they it becomes like their word is their bond. So they're then held to that, and they're like verbally scheduling in something. So at the end of the day, they become like the most flaky, unreliable person you've ever met, and they don't necessarily intend to be that way. But in their mind, it's worse for them to ever commit to anything to then disappoint someone by saying that they're not going. So they never say they're going anywhere or doing anything. Or they don't
Mm,
share how they feel about things. They'll be like, "Are you okay? How are we doing on this thing?" They'll be like, "Yep, I'm fine."
yeah. Yeah. I
That's
think that to further your point of, you can stream every day and not grow, I agree 100%. And I think the reason I brought up discipline in that is also like how it ties into motivation. I firmly believe that a lot of the people who do stream don't understand their motivation behind it. Like you said, they're not like
absolutely
introspective and they say to themselves, I enjoy streaming. But then very rapidly it becomes, well, I have to stream Rainbow Six Siege because that's how I get viewers and I don't like playing that. It's like, well, check back in with yourself. Because now it sounds like your goal with streaming is to acquire viewers. It's no longer an activity for you. Your goal is to acquire viewers. And it's like, no, no, no. Well, I enjoy it. Well, you can enjoy it and still have a different goal than what you originally intended because are you really enjoying it if you're still I have friends who tell me this all the time. Like, I built my entire audience playing PUBG and I don't want to play it anymore. And I'm like, okay, well then switch games and you'll probably get a drop, but you can probably rebuild if it's meant to be and, get back to enjoying it. Yeah, but, then I'm going to drop like 80% of my viewership. What kind of advice is that? Well, you just told me you stream because you like it. And now you're telling
right.
me you're streaming because you want viewers. So that's another thing is and I think
I love that. Yeah.
somebody said like how do we make time to, enjoy like or to force ourselves to do the things we enjoy? Some of it is like checking back in. Do I still enjoy this? Or do I feel obligated to finish something I started? I do that with books a lot. A lot of the time, I'll start a book and I'm not enjoying it, and I sit there and I read it anyway. And I will find other things to do to avoid reading the book, but I won't start a new book. And then I'll sit here and be like, I haven't read a book in 4 months or finished a book in 4 months. That's crazy. And I have to check back in and realize, like, do I enjoy this book?
Mm-hmm.
Do I enjoy reading? Am I still a reader? And I think the other thing is like Cobra said, time management, holding yourself accountable in some ways and having the discipline to not spend all of your free time lollygagging, which is something I did a lot when I worked mind numbing 9 to 5s. I would sit here and say, well, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. And when I stood back and really thought about it, I realized that I was wasting so much of my time unwinding after
Mm,
my 8-hour day. And that time was spent, drinking beer and watching really shitty TV. So was I really unwinding?
mm.
You know? Or like bumbling around on the internet, bumbling around on Imager. It wasn't ever spent like doing things I truly enjoyed. And then I spent all of my time talking about how I didn't have time to do anything because I was working 2 jobs, you know?
Which is, I think you're going into a place that I think is interesting because that is, it's like in absolutes, it's completely true, right? Like if you're spending all your time, all your free time doing something that you objectively at the end of the day are like, oh, that was wasteful and I didn't like it. I get that. But I think it's funny too because, and this goes in line with the word, again, discipline, is this idea of like, maybe you should work a 9 to 5 and then come home, go to the gym, and then from there cook a dinner, and then from there read a book. And then maybe some days that's way too fucking much. That's like
Yeah.
way too fucking much, and you will actually crash and burn. And that kind of goes back to something that you were describing again, but I think that's such an interesting part of motivation. I think everyone has motivation for absolutely everything, whether you know it or not. And I
Mhm.
think literally just the thought practice of unpacking what your motivation is so important. So you're using the example of your friend that was like, I stream because I want to have fun. But then it turns out their motivation was to have viewers. There is, and I think that's what's interesting too, is there's not necessarily a bad and good motivation. Obviously, we can take it to extremes. Like, my motivation is to kill every person. It's like, well, I guess that's a bad one. But at the same time, like, to get viewers, okay, that's probably pretty shallow, but maybe for that person, that is actually a game in and of itself, and that is really fun for them. And that's what I think is really interesting about this is that motivations can be different things, but you have to be willing to move it up and down and then also approach it from like a honest standpoint, right? I think another
Mhm.
example too is sometimes people go through breakups and they're like, well, I'm in the gym and I'm not ever going to check Facebook. And your motivation and then discipline there is that you are angry or upset and you're going to take it out by, ignoring the concept or like putting it away from you. And then you're also going to try and get in the gym. And for some people it's to like get the emotion out, but for other people they're like, fuck it, I'm gonna look so good so that I can get back at them and be with somebody else, or whatever like that. And that's actually a thing. That's something that people do. Again, motivation, I don't think except for the extremes, I don't think it's actually bad, right? Like if that gets you in the gym and you're
Mhm.
doing better, that's okay.
Yeah.
But if you leave it on that angry pike and you're just kind of like, it can end up feeling zero. It can end up feeling empty. So that's why it's so important to constantly be evaluating what your motivation is, I think. Which again is something that I think the average person does not do almost ever. Like, why are you doing that thing you're doing? Ah, fuck it.
Yeah.
There's a simple answer. It's like, you know, get in your
Yeah.
head a little bit about it.
I had that epiphany as well, of, well, what is it that I actually enjoy about streaming?
Hmm.
Do I enjoy the act of going live? Do I enjoy talking to people? What part of this is it that I enjoy? I know why I started. Contrary to what a lot of people think, it was never for like a super social reason.
Hmm.
I am somebody that I really like. Um, this is like a little bit of an example, but I every time I read a book, I actually like write about it. Like I have a list of
Oh,
all the books
interesting.
I've read, and I love Goodreads because that wasn't a thing when I was young. But I've been doing this ever since I was like 12 because just the idea of having lists of all the books I read and how I felt about them was very satisfying to me in like a weird serial killer kind of way. And if you actually go back to my original description on my Twitch channel, it was like, this channel I'm making to chronicle my gaming journey because that was it. I just
Mm.
wanted to play because, like I said, I grew up in India for 10 years of my life. I just wanted to play a bunch of old retro games that I had never played because I never owned a PS2 or a PlayStation 1. And that was like one of the first games I streamed on Twitch. Twitch was Brave Fencer Musashi, and then like Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9. And I just like Metal Gear Solid. Those were like the first games I played. And anyone will tell you, like, you do not get viewers playing those games. I somehow got viewers, but I think a part of that was because I was in a really weird time slot in the middle of the night. So I was just one of the few people that was online and it panned out for me. But, what I started with was like very like, retro games that maybe a lot of people don't check for. Some of them were cult classics. And from there, I built a variety casting channel. I've never relied on one singular game to build a channel.
Hmm.
I don't recommend doing that. If you're serious about building a platform on Twitch, you should not start with retro games unless you're like a speedrunner or something, because it's just the least efficient way to do it. But that's not what I was trying to do. And then after like it started to grow and I started to be like, man, I don't really like networking. I say this to Jeff all the time. Like, I hate networking. I hate like the only part I enjoy about streaming is like the actual streaming part.
But to be clear, you don't hate networking, you hate the game of networking, right? Like if you end up a
Yes.
friend with somebody and they help you out, that's cool. But you don't like to
Yes.
like, hey, I'd like to stream with you because you're a bigger streamer. You know, like you hate that part, I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah. I don't like the politics of it. I don't like, the way a lot of these people conduct themselves. I think a big part of that is because I am older, I'm
Hmm.
30. So a lot of Twitch streamers are like 20, 19, and then they act like
I am
they've
older. I'm
never had a
30
real
years
job.
old.
Well, I mean, for Twitch, I'm basically
I
a
guess.
grandma. Come on,
Yeah, my chat's gonna out
like,
you now. I've got like 45-year-olds in my chat all the time, man. Go
and
ahead.
I'm not saying 30 is old because when I'm outside of Twitch, I don't feel
Yeah, yeah,
old. But when I'm on Twitch, I feel like a fucking, like at TwitchCon, I feel like a goddamn dinosaur.
yeah.
I'm not going to lie. Like in everyday life, I feel like young as a, yearling. I feel like a brand new buck, and then when I go to TwitchCon and people are like, yeah, I still live with my mom and I've been, I'm hoping that this year I'll move out. And they're like 22. I'm like, Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
you are a fetus.
Yes.
Like I didn't even know what the internet was when I was 20. Well, I did know what the internet was when I was 22. But you know what I mean? Like that was back when you had to use fraps and you basically needed a $3,000 computer to create content. So things have changed a lot. That's like a whole other thing though.
Oh yeah.
Cause now I'm thinking about that. Like that used to creating content and like videos like back in the day was required so much technology and money and effort. It was still poor quality. And now you could do it with the click of a button on a single PC setup.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it gets ridiculous. We
Damn.
used calculators back in the day, man. Like little fucking, it's ridiculous. Now everyone just pulls out their phone, obviously, or whatever. Like we actually had calculators.
Yeah.
I bet
Yeah.
kids. What was it? The TI-89? What was it?
I loved my TI-89
Is it
so much.
TI-89? Right? I bet they
Yeah.
don't
Mhm.
exist. Someone who's young in the chat saw a couple of you out yourselves. Do TI-89s or whatever
But
95s?
that's a graphing calculator though. Like, can you graph on your phone? I don't know. That's a
I bet
legit
you
question.
could on an iPad at least, right? Like you would. There's probably an app.
Oh,
Cobra's about the answer. Yes, you can.
you
Yeah, yeah.
oh, you can. Okay.
But my question, my greater question is, I bet people don't have TI-80 whatevers.
I loved mine. I figured out how to get like a program on there to play Tetris, and I just thought that thing was the coolest. So
Uh, well, to bring us
loved my
back,
TI-89.
um, I was very much so like I like what you said though about and I think this is interesting as well as motivation and what makes you happy in terms of like you're talking about your inefficient way of starting your channel, but you did it because that's what you were going to kind of get into, and that's how you want to start it. For me, my career in casting was always kind of natural, but I think it's really interesting because even in the midst of my career, I had to acknowledge and analyze what motivated me and then kind of work with that to then make me happy. So a good example is like 2010, 11, 12, that area when StarCraft 2 was absolutely on top. It was very big. I would read all the comments. I had a lot of people, I've always been a very opinionated guy that makes a lot of jokes or whatever. So I always have like a pretty staunch, like, I love Jeff. And then to the left of that person, someone says, he's the worst human I've ever heard in my life. I hate him. And it used to like really disturb me. And I'd be very like, what? I'm just sharing my opinion. And I'd kind of shout them down on YouTube or on Reddit or whatever. Um, but and so then my unknown motivation that I did not unpack was that I wanted to be like the most popular and best commentator and personality, and by golly, if I wasn't, then they must be an idiot. Like they must be wrong. And man, did that get me into a lot of obviously bad places. But I think what's also interesting too is that if you don't evaluate your motivation, and maybe you don't care, and that's fine too. But it's interesting because if your motivations are certain ways, even unbeknownst to you, I guess is what I'm saying, it creates an image of yourself in a feel, right? So like because I was constantly yelling at people that didn't like me or whatever and trying to convince them to like me by yelling at them, hey, it ended up that some people thought I was angry or I wasn't enjoying what I was doing, and then it actually became a self-fulfilling prophecy at some points where because I was spending so much time with the negative people around my content, I was becoming negative. And it was only a few years later, and obviously through like the experience of having this go on, that I began to be like, why is this happening? What is going on? And through experience, but also through evaluating that, you kind of get to a place where, at least for me, I was like, I'm not motivated to make everyone like me. If I was, this is not the personality that I would be, right? Like I wouldn't make jokes, I wouldn't tease, I wouldn't be opinionated. That's not how you get everyone to like you. But that's what makes me happy. So I need to accept that what comes with that territory is that some people will disagree with you, and then they'll
Mm-hmm.
take that to the next level where they're like, because I disagree with that person, I really don't like them. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. And it's actually okay for them to not like me. And I know that sounds really, it's funny because it sounds really basic, right? But I challenge the chat because I know a lot, 99% of you probably are not public people for the most part. But imagine at work, 30% of the people just actively didn't like you because of a conversation they heard. Would that bother you? Would that make your day at work upsetting and tough? Probably, right? Especially if you overheard them talking to other people about how much they don't like you all the time. So, this concept that I had to wrestle with and kind of work on is not so weird. It's just weird because I'm in a place where that's just naturally going to happen. Whereas for most of you guys at your work, if someone doesn't like you, they probably keep it to themselves or they tell like one or two other people. But it's certainly
Yeah.
not 30 to 40% of the people or something like that.
Actually, like I relate to that a lot
Yeah,
because I went through something very similar where for a while there, every single day, I was legitimately angry and I couldn't figure out where that was coming from. And I had to sit down and realize, like, do I enjoy this? Like, is this something I enjoy? And I realized, like, I was letting shit slide that I would never let slide in, like, in any other situation, you
yeah,
know? Like, the 4th time you tell somebody, like, "Please stop calling me sweetheart," you
oh yeah,
know? And, like, the fit like, this is shit that if you said this to me in real life, like, if you were a coworker and you call me sweetheart after the 4th time, I'd probably fucking suplex you in a fucking table, right? And then
yeah,
tell HR to fire you, right? Like, so I was sitting there and I was really thinking about like, well, why do I let this slide? And it's like, well, if I don't let it slide, then people will leave, people will unsub, like I'm not nice and friendly. And when people say, hey, can you say hi to me? Can you wish me a happy birthday? And I remember the first day, like I said this and it was so liberating. I was like, no, this isn't a fucking daycare. Like, I'm here to create this content and you're here to watch it. I'm not here to give you individual fucking attention and
yeah.
hold your dick for you. Like, that's so fucking creepy. Like, if you want your little one-on-one attention, like, go to a fucking porn site and pay them the requisite amount of money because I'm not doing that shit for free.
Mhm.
I said it and I was like, oh my god, I've been holding, like, this in for this entire time, and I realized, like, oh, my job had become, like, not what I wanted it to originally be, but I had to check in with myself and be like, "You are gonna lose subs." There are people who sub to me all the time who are fucking creepy, and I ban them, and I have to accept that
Mhm.
that will probably stunt the growth of my channel, but I have to check back in and realize, like, do I care enough? And it's like, for me to enjoy my everyday is way more important than it is for me to have an extra 300 subscribers who when I see their name in chat, I fucking cringe,
Yeah.
because people are habitual line steppers,
Oh yeah.
Like,
Myself included.
there's people who habitually, like, line step, and if you as a creator, you have to, like, sit there and think, "This person spends a lot of money here, or they spend a lot of time here. Am I alienating a viewer? Am I alienating my audience? Am I" and you have to make a decision, and for me, it's like, I don't have any tolerance for
Yeah.
creepy fucking shit, man. I just don't. It psychically upsets me. I would rather have someone come in and tell me that they think I'm ugly, that they think I look like a dude, and ask me if I'm trans, all these things. I would rather have that than have someone in my chat every day who comes in and says, "Hey, baby," like that is what it's like. I can't fucking tolerate that
Yeah.
disrespect, you
And
know?
that's ultimately, and I like that. So you've identified for your motivation that in the long run you would be more unhappy if you let that stuff slide than it is to ruffle feathers and kind of deal with that.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
moving a little bit away from that, but I think this is hopefully I can communicate this appropriately. So a situation happened. I'm not going to use names, but I think it's something that like haunt is almost too strong of a word, but these concepts come up and have in my life a few times, and I think it is a question of motivation, but it's interesting because it's a challenging one. So socially, I was with several of my peers, 4 or 5 people, one of which was a female. again, a peer, and then another person is a person that we're all friends for the most part, or at least peers. But a very awkward thing happened where one person's kind of socially a little bit weird, and they told the girl, like, that's my spot, you're not going to sit there. And not actually, I think their exact words were like, I've been sitting there for 3 days, can you move? And then that girl was like, well, I'm already set up, I need this spot. And the other person was like, just please move. And it was really uncomfortable, and it was obviously socially not okay. And I think what's so interesting about these situations, and it paralyzed me a little bit, because it's like at the end of the day, not a big deal. And then I also think there a lot of people can shirk off the situation and say it's their situation. You don't even need to get involved. But I think what's specifically for me, but then I think the greater question is even moving beyond my own example. What's interesting is I'm a confident, established, physically powerful. Not that that really matters. It's not going to become a fight or something like that. But like every time this kind of situations happen in my life, eyes shift to me, and it's like, what did you do in this situation? And a few times, to say something or to step in is to immediately elevate it to a place where it then does become a confrontation. And it doesn't matter how calm or nice I am about it. It literally just becomes, it's 2 versus 1. So all of a sudden, or if me stepping in, it just becomes like that person then gets like pinged with, oh, I was being a dick is what I'm being accused of, and now I'm defensive and I'm upset, and it's this big thing. This happened a few times in my life, and it's very often male female dynamic. But I was not proud, because this time I kept quiet. I let them resolve it, and they did, but it was uncomfortable and it was weird. And then for me, I've been reflecting on this, and this is like literally 4 days ago, so I'm just like working this over in my head. Motivation wise, I want to be the kind of person that when I witness even something like that, it's again, not that I hit the red button and make it full nuclear. It's more that I go like, hey, I step in and I got somebody's back. I'm like, this is not, it's not a cool way to talk to people, because I've heard from other people how important it is to them to have someone in that moment step in and be like, that's not how you should treat somebody. And this is not okay. And it also gives a chance for the other person to then be like, oh, I was being a dick. I didn't really mean it that way, and I'm sorry. But if you keep it quiet and people just kind of witness it, I feel like I don't know, it makes my skin crawl, because it's like one of those situations where maybe it does escalate, and then that person felt abandoned. Does that
Yeah.
describe it at all? It's
That's a
really tough for me. Yeah,
that's a tough situation to be in though.
yeah,
And I'm kind of like you, I'm a little bit of a crusader, and I probably stick my nose in places where I shouldn't, but I can't tolerate like behavior that I don't approve of and without calling it out. And I don't necessarily fight with people, but just saying like, "Hey, just so you know, like you shouldn't talk to people like that. It's incredibly rude," or like you
yeah.
yeah, but it's rough because it's like as soon you're right, as soon as a third party is inserted, now it's like it has escalated, because it wasn't like we like to pretend it's not an issue, but then the second you acknowledge that there's an elephant in the room, that
And I think
is
you become
like,
an accomplice to some degree. Like when if
yeah.
that person is scarred by that moment, if you did just sit there, they don't think fondly of you. They think that person could have helped me, and they didn't. Crayson asked if is it because they're a woman? Is that why it was important? And would you have the same reaction if they're a man? So I think we can be very frank, and I think that's what the show's for. I think that's a very interesting concept, because I was raised in a kind of family and atmosphere in society where you should help, and specifically a woman in that situation. And I think what's interesting about that is I've been kind of reaffirmed, at least in the gaming industry. There are like if we're gonna pretend, and I know that there's some stats that where they're like there's more female gamers than male gamers. That's fine. Maybe that's even true. Let's just excuse that for a second. At least in esports, or at least kind of where I operate, it's heavily male dominated. And if we go about it with this idea of like the minority doesn't need to be stood up for, or they don't need probably more help. I mean, this is also very Twitch applicable as well, right? Like this idea that um we're all on equal footing, and like here's an example where a booby streamer got more viewers and this other guy's working just as hard, but he doesn't have boobs, so he didn't get, like, I don't think we should degrade to that. Like, let's just address it as it is. Minority groups feel outgunned, and they can feel uncomfortable in these kind of situations. And if you're a part of the majority, I'm a fucking blonde-haired, blue-eyed white male who's been around forever. Like, I'm as majority as they possibly can get. I have an extra I should feel extra motivated to help those that need more help, as opposed to like a various like if this situation happened to me, it would be nice if somebody stepped in, but I'd also feel more comfortable handling it myself because I'm established, because I'm comfortable. Whereas for female in esports and stuff like that, it's a lot harder, right?
I think I used to be on the other side of it for the longest time, which is really funny. Like, I used to be one of those people that was like, when people would say, call me things like marginalized, I still get like annoyed by that. But I always feel like I don't need your fucking help, you know? Like I don't fucking need you.
Yeah.
But I was in a work situation where I talked about it on stream, where I worked at this hedge fund and I was a trading assistant. And I pitched an idea during like the morning meeting, and my boss responded with, "Well, aren't you a clever little monkey?" And I
Jesus.
was just like,
Yeah. It
I don't
happens
even
all the time,
I
though. It's
don't
the
even
fucked
know if it
up
was a
part.
race thing. Like,
Yeah.
I was just, like, shocked. I was like, "Did he just call me?" And for the record, I was the only brown person in my office.
It's
I
just
was
a
like, "Did
poor
you
choice
call
of
me a
words
clever
at
little
best,
monkey?"
right?
Yeah, so I just kind of, like, dismissed it, and then, like, little microaggressions like that would happen, where
Yeah.
he would say things like in that vein, you know? And it wasn't the first time I was just, like, stunned because I was like, "Huh, okay." And then the second time, I was like, "Well, now we're, like, starting to compile a list."
Yeah.
And the thing was, I didn't wanna say anything because I didn't wanna be the person to, like, rock the boat, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't wanna feel like I was playing a card and, like, coming out of here and being like, "Hey, when you say these things, you're, like, kind of being a little racist," you know? I didn't wanna, because it seemed like nobody else was acknowledging
And
it.
then you would become that girl that cries racism over a silly
Yeah.
little joke and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas if one of my coworkers, male or female, had been like,
Hey.
"Hey, every time we cater lunch, you shouldn't tell Jasmine to order something exotic." Like, it's not really, you know, cool. Because he would do that. If he had, like, a really important business meeting, he would be like, "Oh, like, let's get that catered," and then he would tell his assistant to have me order it because he wanted something fancy and exotic, and I'd be like, I'm eating a tuna sandwich for lunch. Like, what do you mean fancy and exotic? Like, it was really weird. So it's one of those things where I'm one of those people who never cries wolf, but because of that, but I see a lot of people do it. If I'm being completely honest, I've seen a lot of people turn things into race things that
Oh yeah.
aren't. And I've seen a lot of people turn things into misogynistic things that
Hmm.
aren't. And this is one of the few cases in my life where I was like, this is really cut and dried. Like, he would say, like, if I was having trouble with something, like, why is this late? He would say things like, well, like, come on, Indians are good with computers, and like snap his fingers at me and tell me to
Yep.
hurry up. And I was just like, this is awful. Like, these are like adding up. All of these things are adding up. And at first I wasn't that bothered by the clever little monkey remark. But now, like, well, you're supposed to be good with computers, right? And all that like adds up. And I'm like, no, the dude legit fucking called me a monkey.
Yeah.
Like, originally when it happened, I was like, weird. But after all those other things, I was like, this motherfucker called me a monkey. You know,
Yeah.
like, in retrospect, I was like, oh, like, but originally I was like, nah, it's fine. And that's usually how this stuff happens, is like, it's never one thing, right, Jeff? Like,
Right.
it's always like, oh, this isn't the first time this person has said something to her. Or this isn't the first. It's like all these little things, and everybody watches it happen. And those individual, like, events are never worth making a fuss about. But to a certain extent, what I've learned with age is you have to create a paper trail.
Hmm.
You have to, like, address it when it pops up so that everybody acknowledges that this thing happened, and then you have something to build on when people try to gaslight you and they try to say like, "No, no, 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 no. I just think she has really good taste in food and she's really good with computers because she plays games all the time." And you, like, start moving backwards, like, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And you have, like, a really strong record to, like, confront someone about their behavior.
Yep.
And I totally get where you're coming from now, but it took me having a few jobs to realize that, because before that, if somebody were to be like, "I just feel obligated to step in when I see a minority in distress," I'd be like, "I don't need your help." And now I'm like, well, it would have been nice if one of my coworkers had
Yep.
been like,
But
"That's
both are true,
a
right? Which
little
is funny, and I
inappropriate."
think that's why I think it's so good to have these thought practices and to think about it too. Because at the same time, to go back to kind of the almost accusation, but like, should I jump in every time a woman seems in distress? Am I that superhero guy? No, because I think even in that,
No.
I think even that is actually bad as well. But what I think is good is to evaluate and to be conscientious and aware. Like I would like to think that the good way to handle, you know, your situation, what you went through, would be like, it's how you handle it too, right? Like you'd pull them aside and be like, hey, maybe you meant nothing, but just I'm a little bit sensitive to those kind of remarks. So if you don't mind, like kind of stay away from calling me a monkey, that kind of thing. And then maybe that would have curbed the entire thing. Or maybe the guy's actually a full-on douche racist and it just keeps happening and he's a misogynist, that kind of stuff. Then, like you said, you
Yeah.
have a paper trail where you're like, hey, I've talked to you 3 times. So like now I know you're trying to offend me. Like you're fucking up and I'm going to get pretty upset if you keep it up, type of thing.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
it's especially if it's behavior that everyone else acknowledges instead of like you're just being sensitive or
right.
and I think that's true of men as well. I just think it's one of those things that the only I guess I'll say this, if I wasn't the only brown person in the room, I don't think I would have needed an ally, if that makes sense, but when you are, if you're the only female in the room,
Oh, yeah.
then it's like you're making an issue of something that other people don't make an issue of. So, and that's like I think that you should step in for men who are being bullied as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, certain companies have come out and like dudes get hazed all the time.
Absolutely.
And things that are totally acceptable to do to men are often not acceptable to do to women. And the same thing applies of like stepping in and being like,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, this person is, you know, like I had a friend who'd never really been in a relationship and he was in his 20s and the amount he got hazed by my other friends was
Oh, yeah.
unacceptable. And this is in a social setting, not even in a work setting. And it wasn't until I made an issue of it that other people spoke up and were like, "Yeah, we probably shouldn't make fun of this dude for like holding on to his virginity," you know?
Yep.
Especially because for him it was very much a choice. But it wasn't until I stepped in as like one of the few females in our friends group and said, "You need to lay off. Like this is terrible. You guys are relentless and this is awful." That
Yep.
other people then stepped up and were like, "Yeah, I've been feeling that way for a while." You know, like stop like, you know, getting drunk girls to hit on him at bars or paying them 25 bucks to fuck with him or making jokes or, you know, just stop because
Mm-hmm.
it's too much. Like it's gone too far and it's not funny. And it clearly bothers him. It clearly offends him.
And that's why I find that this falls into the category of motivation and it's all encompassing because there's a lot of people in the chat for the most part giving kind of like a yeah buts or this thing or another. The example of male versus female situation. I think what's really nice about this talk is you can kind of zoom back for a second and say there's all kinds of reasons why specific examples may or may not fit with your mental paradigm of how you kind of want to go about these things, but what motivates you in these situations? Do you want to be the kind of person that wants to err on the side of male or female? I don't care, majority or minority, whatever. I stay quiet. I don't ruffle feathers. If I see something bad going on like that, maybe it's not my place, or you know, if I get in there, it could make it even worse. Does that feel comfortable for you? Is that the kind of person you want to be? Cool, that's fine if that's who you are. I personally could not sleep if at the end of the day I was regarded as the kind of person that would like witness atrocities or be around when someone needs help. And instead of helping them, I was kind of more like, it's socially awkward to say something here. Or what if they're just joking around and they, you know, all of a sudden it's about me being awkward. I can't, I can't do it. And I'll tell you, this comes from a place where I failed. I'm not saying that I'm this excellent hero human throughout my life. I've had situations where I should have fucking said something, I should have done something, and I didn't, and it haunts me to this day. I should have done more. And the other nice thing about age is that there will be situations that you didn't know you were equipped for. And this is getting a little bit off topic of motivation, but I guess it's interesting
Mhm.
to think about within what we're talking about, where you think you're ready for everything and you want to think you're the kind of person that'll do something. I'm not going to use names again, but this example, like it just fucking bothers me. It's so bad. It is male female again, so if you're triggered by that, then I apologize in advance. But a very executive, powerful male that owned a company that I worked for, which is makes it more awkward. But when I say worked for, it's esports, so I was contracted by them, type of thing. At a drunken party, like he was drunk, we weren't. He put his hand up the skirt of a girl that I knew right next to me, and it was so in the open. It was so awkward and terrible. What the situation called for was for me to break his jaw and to like people would have to pull me off of him. And to be honest, and this is not me being bravado or cool, in that situation, that's what he deserved. Like, so I'm not going to tell you that violence is the answer for everything. But if a guy's that far out of line, he should be punched. He should be taken out. That's my code. That's what I think should have happened. But because it's so fucking, it's just so awkward to do that. It was so weird, and it was so inappropriate all around. I didn't do much. I consoled the girl. I took her out of there. I felt terrible, but the guy was like barely even verbally reprimanded. And I, like I said, I go back to that moment a lot in my mind because, you know what? Take away even the fact that I felt like I should have punched him. My point is, I should have said something. I should have yelled. I should have called attention to this, and that person should have felt like there was someone absolutely at their back for how terrible that situation was. And the honest answer is, it's not like I immediately was like, no, I'm not going to do that because it's awkward. That's not what I thought. I was paralyzed. I was so
Yeah.
frozen.
I was going to say, I was like, that's something that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's awesome that you like kind of learned from that situation, but I don't think it's something you should guilt yourself over.
Well, so, and that's where motivation circles back. So I hear you, and I don't necessarily, I'm not going to like turn myself into the police and be like, I deserve jail time or something like that. But I'm motivated to be the person that if I view or witness something like that, I'm not frozen. I'm not useless, basically. I want to be the kind of person that knows what to do. And I think what's really scary and weird is sometimes you have to experience terrible things to then know how you'll react to them. And your first reaction won't be very good. And then for other people, it will be very good. That's awesome. For me, it wasn't. That was not the reaction I wanted to have. And in the future, I hope to have a better reaction. But it only goes through unpacking the motivation of that. Like, if I just would have written that off and it's too scarring to even think about, let's just move away from it, I think that moment in time would not have been beneficial to me. But now, because it is something that I've thought so much about and worked on so much, I hope I never have to. But in the future, if I witness something like that happening, I know how I feel if I don't do something. So you bet your fucking ass I'm going to do something that next time and help that person better. That is
That's
interesting.
awesome. It's like a really good outlook to have. I think I'm biased though, because I was raised in the Sikh faith and my entire faith revolves around like fighting to protect people. Like
Mm.
the largest sin in the Sikh faith is to witness an injustice and do nothing, which is
Mm.
why people who are baptized are required to carry like a sword or a knife with them at all times.
I did not know
And
that.
you're required to grow your hair and keep it in a turban so that you're easily recognizable. You're supposed to kind of be like a
Mm.
police officer in some ways, which is why Punjab is such a great, like, safe state, and that's where I was raised, and I grew up with experiences like that, with, dudes, like, on a bus full of people, and there's several seats, like, sitting next to me on purpose and kind of crossing that line of, like, and I remember, a gentleman in the a sardar in the back of the bus who just went, "Hey!" Just like that, and put his finger at the dude, and the dude got up and moved four rows down. And that's all he did. He just made that sound and like stared and put the finger at him. And I was like, I grew up around Jeffs.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, it's kind of cool. It's refreshing to see that perspective and other people. It's always great because it's like I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should say something. I didn't know if I was going to say something, if he was going to get offended and do something back. And this guardian angel from the back of the bus
Mm.
lifted up this finger and like rescued me.
Yeah.
Didn't even have to beat the guy's ass. Just let him know, like, I'm watching you and I've been watching you.
And that feels
Um,
good, right? Like, just the idea that
yeah,
someone has your back and that someone witnessed something that's not right. Doesn't matter. I used a big example, but just up and down. Like, and he also responded in kind, right? Like, he didn't get up and punch the guy and start doing ninja kicks. He was just like, hey, don't be a dick. And the
yeah,
guy was like, all right,
yeah.
that's
I'm
more trouble
watching
than I
you.
want.
Stop it. Yeah, and he was just like, "This ain't worth it." That dude looks scary as fuck, especially with that sound he made. He was like, "Nah, I don't want the smoke,"
Yeah.
which is kind of cool. But it's interesting because I think, like, it loops right back in. Like, growing up in that faith, like, it's all about discipline. Like, it's a faith literally built on like discipline. on like daily prayer and like I said, protecting people that need protecting, and waking up at 6 a.m. in the morning and bathing and meditating. It's an
Hmm.
entire faith built on like meditation and trying to be bigger than yourself, right? They call themselves saint soldiers because that's what they attain to be, is like scholarly and well learned, but also like, brave. And
Mm.
that's kind of something I've taken into my daily life a little bit. So I think maybe that's why I kind of, I aspire to be that. I never will hit those goals. I have infinite respect for them, and I love them all, and I love that, my family is Sikh, and there's so many turbaned gentlemen in my family that espouse those goals and work hard every day to embrace them. I just hope to maybe have 10% of that. That's the goal, to have me just like maybe 10%, because that type of stuff takes bravery.
Yep.
Stepping into a situation that you're not otherwise involved in takes a lot of bravery.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
very big of you to do something in that moment.
Yeah, someone in the chat asked. They said, "Was it because they were such a powerful executive that you didn't act?" And I think it kind of goes with what Bronze is just describing right now. Like, I hope myself and most people go to a place where it doesn't matter. Like, and to give you the full answer, again, I didn't sit there and calculate what am I going to do. It just happened, and then you had 5 seconds to react. And my gut reaction at the time was, "This is too awkward. This guy is powerful, and he's the center of this party. If I do something, it's really weird. Like, it's going to call attention from hundreds of people there in this lobby." But upon reflection and thinking about it, I don't care who the person is. What they did was wrong. And again, I'm not talking about like I should have murdered the guy. Like, no, I'm not saying that. But I should have done something more. I should not have just sat there quietly and then privately consoled the girl. I should have. A guy shouldn't get away with that, right? And that's kind of what she's
Yeah.
talking about with the Sikhism and the guy in the bus. Like, I love that. That's amazing. And that's what I want to. I want to aspire to be that kind of person where if I see some shit like that, I don't care if it's Barack fucking Obama or something like that. I'm gonna be like, hey, that's uncalled for and terrible. And that's my motivations to circle it back to our topic. And what I like about this so much, like I said, is that this concept goes everywhere. Like, just thinking about what motivates you and what changes you into the person you kind of want to be is what I like so much about this. And then discipline kind of is like your set of tools to get there, I find. So for me, it's a lot of introspection and thought practice, which doesn't work for everyone too, right? Like, some people have a real tough time being self-critical, and maybe there's a time where I didn't, but I think, and this is kind of weird to give this a lot of credit, but I played StarCraft for 20 years. And in StarCraft, you're constantly being like, well, I fucked up there, so what do I need to do differently? And then you'll think you did it right, and you'll be like, well, I just fucked up again. Geez, like, you never play a game of StarCraft where you didn't fuck up 100 times, right? And then sometimes you play a great game of StarCraft, but someone's just better than you. And that's a good thing to learn from StarCraft as well. Sometimes you're like, shit, that guy's just way better than me. But they're working with the same stuff that I am, so I can get there too. So I'm going to work really hard to get there. And that's been kind of what's molded me in life, is like, I, it's funny because, again, I'm a big confident dude. So a lot of times people are like, well, I didn't want to say that to you because I thought you just yell at me and argue and you're really strongly opinionated. And I'm like, I can see why I exude that kind of image, but I need you to know, like, as my friend, you can talk to me because I'm constantly aware that I fuck up and I want to do better. And I can't unless people tell me, or I tell myself, which is, you can't rely on that. You need people to tell you. So,
Yeah. I think this podcast is probably a little bit shocking for some people, because I'm sure we both have that like, oh, well, if she disagrees with me, she's gonna yell. There's tons of takes in chat right now I disagree with. And
yeah.
honestly, like, it just comes down to a level of mutual respect. And as long as you can say, you know what, I don't really see that, or you know what, I kind of think I just don't, that
Hmm.
works for you, it's not going to work for me, I don't really care, it's like, cool, that's awesome.
Yep.
This is just how I go about things, and everybody's life is different, everyone's experiences are different. I can't speak to anybody else's experience, and I think that we need to have more authentic conversations like this on the
Hmm.
internet. Last year I was called a fascist, like a Nazi, like an actual Nazi fascist on Twitter.
Mm.
Me. All because I was saying like, well, you can disagree with ICE, but throwing bottles at cars with kids in them of ICE employees because that happened in Portland or whatever. It was like
Hmm.
probably not like, and they're like, why? They're keeping children from their families, so that, therefore they deserve it. I'm like, it to me, it rubs me the wrong way because at the end of the day, like, yeah, people are. I feel like people are just trying to work their 9 to 5. Now, my mom worked for the police department, so I'm the first person to say that I'm probably heavily biased,
Oh yeah.
to like if the police department had to go do
We
something
all
terrible,
are one way or
yeah,
another.
we're all biased. That's part of logic is understanding that you are incredibly biased. If my mom had to go do something that was inappropriate or that, because the orders came down from up top and that most people didn't agree with, I can tell you right now, this is a single income household and she couldn't afford to quit her job. So we were living paycheck to paycheck. And how would I feel if she was driving me to school and someone threw a bottle at our car?
Yeah.
That's where my brain went. Now, I think if I were to sit here and tell that whole story, most people wouldn't say I was a Nazi. But with the way the internet is right now, it's like either you agree with us or you're a Nazi. And
Yeah.
I feel like that, especially in America, that is tearing us apart, is that
Hmm.
inability to. And I've gotten, for the record, I've gotten like, I've caught fire for this. I used to work at a studio and we did a comic book show and somebody was like, it's just really sad to see that racism won in the country today. And I was like, assuming that all of the people that voted for Trump are racist is a very dangerous assumption because,
So you must be a Trump supporter and you hate
and yeah,
immigrants.
and it became all these immediate, and I was like, no, I just refuse to believe that many people in this country hate brown people. I refuse to believe
Right.
that.
Or
I
that's
don't
the only
believe
reason to
that.
vote for that person too.
And I think that people are, they there you have single issue voters. And I was like, I think there's a lot of ways to rationalize this, but I think that it's very dangerous to say that these people are racists because you're further alienating them and you're pushing out people that, like I was like, that's a terrible thing to say. And I refuse to live in that world, in this fake
Yeah.
reality where everybody that doesn't agree with you is racist. That's terrible. And this was live on air and everyone was like, okay, no, like shut it down. Like apparently it was inappropriate. It was inappropriate for me to say that, which to me is like, but that's how
Hmm.
I feel, like, and I feel like that's not a radical take to say that.
I don't think
But
so either. But even if it was, isn't that funny? Like, and that's why I like you so much, Bronze. That's why you're so awesome. Is I agree with you fully. It's like a lot of these concepts, and that's actually it's not to get political, but I think a big part of the reason Trump did get voted into office was because a lot of issues did become you think this, therefore you're this terrible thing.
yeah,
It was cited quite a bit from a lot of the people that voted for him, where it was like, I was just tired of being told that I'm a bigot or a racist, so I put in the office the guy that says he's going to make all these crazy changes or whatever. And it's like, you are alienating people by saying your opinion equates to this a lot. Like, it just.
no one ever, the second, and I've said this, and this is, I don't know if this is the right forum to say this,
Mhm.
but this is something I truly believe in. It's that nobody, like most, except for the extremes, most people don't ever want to have that label of being racist on them. So even my boss who called me a clever little monkey, I think that, did he engage in some bigoted behaviors? Yes. Do I think he hates Indians? No. And I know that some people are going to sit there and be like, what the fuck? And it's like, people I think are
Mhm.
very misguided. And I think that coming at anybody from that assumption that, like, you said this, you use this word, you did this, or you engage in this behavior, and therefore you are racist. That person is going to shut down and go on the defensive because accepting your criticism would
Yeah.
mean accepting that they are racist. They're going to double down, and you're not going to have any kind of conversation that builds
Yeah.
from there.
Oh God,
It's
that's
not going to
exactly it.
happen. It's never going to happen. No one wants to be called sexist. No one wants to be called racist. It's very important to start a conversation with, hey, Jeff, you said this thing, and I want you to know why I personally found that to be distasteful. Because
Yep.
if I come out of the gate and say, Jeff, you're kind of a misogynist, it's over. He's going to go on the defensive because agreeing with me or listening to me would mean that he is. And no one
But
ever
also
wants to
it
be
devalues that
associated with that.
term. Like,
Yeah.
actual racists, actual bigots, when you associate them with people that just said something stupid, you're actually like whitewashing and minimizing the effectiveness of that term. That's the part. I'm really pragmatic, like to a core. It just issues where like someone hurts. It happens all the time too, where people are like, I feel very strongly about this concept. I go to rallies. I go to I give charity. I'm like really powerful about this thing. And it's like, that's all really cool. And then they're like, what'd you say? Did you just say, like this moderately inappropriate thing? Well, then you're a fucking racist, you piece of shit. You deserve to be punched. And it's like, because you take this concept and you blow it up so big when it's just not called for there, I can't take you serious anymore. So this like thing that you're really in charged about and is a good cause, generally speaking, if you go full nuclear about it, it seems silly, right? Like that happens
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, it happens with anything. And then, we turn it into a joke or a mockery, and then people get really upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what happens. Like when people joke about, like, even when people joke about consent, right? I have a strong feeling like a lot of those jokes popped up around the time it made news that this lady was like, it's important to ask your baby for consent before you change their diaper. Now, this person was clearly just trying to like market, like outrage marketing 101. That's like clearly what they were trying to do. But that turned into like this whole, like, of course, it's the internet. We make a meme out of it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where it's like, you turn it into a gigantic fucking joke and then people get super angry, because it's like, well, consent is a serious issue. Yes, like as we discussed earlier, you witnessed somebody stick their hand up someone's skirt, completely
Mm.
inappropriate. Consent is a very important issue. I think at the end of the day, most people would agree that consent is important. So when you look at the people mocking it, you have to look at like this the fucking scale of like, well, there's also a lady on TV right now who's talking about you need consent before changing a diaper, It's like your baby's sitting there crying and shit, and you're talking about obtaining consent. Like,
Yeah. That is the other side of what I was talking about. That's when people are actually just being silly, but yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well,
This is this is like a
it's been an hour and 20, Bronze. We just did
we
that.
went on a journey.
We always do. I think we always will, too. It's going to be funny. The episodes are going to be taught, like, they're going to be named something, but geez, it's not where we end up at all. That's okay. So I think, unless, do you have any final thoughts or any wrap-up point you want to make?
I don't know. I guess my wrap up point would be, you know, try to instead of using discipline as something just to punish yourself,
Mm-hmm.
try to use it as something to reward yourself too. And like try to make, I know everybody has crazy busy schedules, but if you decide like Sunday afternoon, I'm going to make myself hot chocolate and read this book or draw or knit or do this hobby I don't normally do, use discipline for good things too. Cause I feel like that is something that we don't do. We always, I hate New Year's resolutions for that reason. Like we sit here and make a list of all the things we failed at, all the things we're not good at, all the things that we're garbage at. I think it's really important to try to use discipline not as a tool just to improve yourself, but
Mm-hmm.
also as a tool to like rest, to truly like relax and recharge and make sure that, you use it in that way too. Because sometimes we just forget about it. You'll end up doing your laundry and your chores. And you know what? You can save cleaning your tub for next Sunday. This Sunday, make sure you have the discipline to take some time for yourself.
Yeah, I like that. I think what I would only add is just to reiterate what I've been saying a whole bunch, because it's just, I think it's an important way to kind of view these things, is just to unpack motivation. Doesn't mean you sit and have this weird existential crisis where you evaluate literally everything you've ever done, but perhaps take the few things that are really important to you, be it, whatever. It's your relationship, your job, your caretaking as an animal owner, like all these different things, and just think about what drives you to do it, what makes you interested in continuing to do it. And I think it's like a good I mean, we're gonna eventually have the relationship episode or whatever, and that'll have to be a 7-hour extravaganza. But like for me, like I think it's so important to constantly evaluate yourself and think about it just in general, but specifically through the lens of motivation. I think it can be applied to so many different things. Because you are motivated in all the things you do. You, whether you like it or not, whether you're thinking about it or not, you are. There's a reason why you're doing things, and you are motivated for it. And sometimes you'll find that the reason you're motivated is not actually something you want to be motivated by or like, or, and this is brought up too, sometimes you're motivated by something that maybe is negative at the time, but you can change into a positive. All those things I think are really important if you unpack it and think about it a lot, as opposed to just passively let it happen. Um, or you like set up motivations, but then, and we talked about this at the beginning of the episode, the motivations for that aren't actually what you think is your motivation, and you need to unpack that to maybe arrive at a place where you kind of better understand yourself and why you're doing what you're doing. Deep. It's all so deep. But thank you. Yeah, Bronze is
This is
awesome.
great.
Yep. Episode 2 of the Deadpan Diaries and its extended name, The Trials and Tribulations of Jasmine and Jeff and How They Overcame Them. Uh, someday I'll remember all that. I actually want to remember the.
We're gonna put it on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Take up the whole front of the t-shirt.
What's it called when you take the first letter of everything? Why am I forgetting that? Anyways.
Oh, like a
Somebody in the chat will say it. Acronym. Thank you.
acronym. Good
See,
shit.
sometimes someone can't remember something. It becomes like a.
I got stuck on antonym, and I was like, that's not it. That's the
Antonym?
opposite of a word.
The acronym is like 35 letters long. It's really funny looking. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoy this. We'll put it up on YouTube. We should have an episode next week. If you're just now or joining us sometime after we said this, Bronze is a friend that's a trainer and owns gyms. So we're going to have the gym episode. We're going to talk about probably a lot of motivation again, but also the nitty gritty of like, you know, what can get you in the gym, what can be effective gym training. We'll be looking at the chat a lot. And if you guys have questions, you can ask this professional person. And then I've just lifted for like 20 or 22, 23 years of my life, something like that. So I wouldn't call myself professional, but I know a thing or two. And Bronze has been lifting since she was a young person. She's now old at 30. So since she was young.
I'm fairly new to the world of lifting. That's why I don't have those sweet gains yet. But look, I have like a
That's
little
a
bit of
tricep.
a. I got a divot.
There's
That's
something going
new.
on there. Yeah.
I didn't have that before. It's new.
You could hold water for
Yeah,
a little bit.
could. I could have a drink out of it.
Well, it'd be a tough drink. Bronze, what are you doing next? Where can people find you? Please talk about your channel and stuff.
Oh yeah. Hi, hello. I'm that bronze girl. You can find me on Twitch and on Twitter at that bronze girl. I stream really early in the morning at like 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I'm a variety caster. I do like a little talk show and drink my coffee every morning. So if you like this format, I kind of start every morning a little bit like this, usually a little bit more casual. And yeah, I'm going to be starting some D&D stuff up on my channel soon. So that's me. You might have seen me playing D&D with Kevin Smith. That's the thing that happened as well.
Oh, cool. I saw that. I'm like, damn, isn't that guy? I was like, yep.
Yeah, I look up to him a lot. So as a comic
Oh.
book nerd, like Kevin Smith was like,
He's supposed to be directing the next Spawn movie, actually.
yeah,
Or,
yeah,
like,
I heard
co-directing.
that.
Co-directing.
Yeah.
Which means he's potentially my favorite person in the whole world, or someone I don't care for. We'll see.
Garbage.
Garbage. For me personally, we got the Sunfall Cycle that Bronze and I are both on tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So you guys should check that out. It's all up on Jesse Cox's YouTube as well. So if you're like, I don't know if I don't want to watch it because I haven't seen other stuff, it's all there, and it's pretty darn good. It's a great cast. Steven's got a gloriously weird mind and world, and then everyone's really fun and funny on that show. And then after that, we got the Pylon Show. Tomorrow's guest, it's looking like our Jon Snow and maybe Mana. But then me and Artosis, and we'll be talking about Katowice and everything like that. Yep, Mana did confirm. Okay, cool. Thank you, Matt. And then we will be streaming some more Warhammer 40k in the near future, but not right now, just because we still have to get some stuff. I have to get some tripods. Do you know you can spend $300 on a tripod? What in the absolute fuck? I said you can, because you can. I will not. So I'm looking for cheaper alternatives. I don't need a $300 tripod, for fuck's sakes, to hold up a webcam. Anyways, that's that. I will be streaming some more, probably some XCOM tonight after I get back from the gym. And then this weekend, I'm going down to Burbank to see my special friend. And then I'll be back next week and streaming some more. So that's it. Thank you guys so much. We'll put this up on YouTube soon. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.